The battle for the city of Bakhmut, or what Russia calls Artyomsk, has been going on for 7 months. Despite the tough pace, the Russian army slowly continued to encircle the city, which is considered the most strategic in the Donetsk region. Russian mercenary group Wagner claims it controls 70% of Bakhmut territory. Although the truth has not been confirmed, this difficult situation has become a dilemma for Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky. He said that if his troops surrendered the town of Bakhmut, his government would be under domestic and international pressure to seek peace with Russia. And it is even more difficult for this city in the Donetsk region to return to the bosom of the motherland. Our people are going to be exhausted, he told the Associated Press, AP, in an interview released Wednesday. Our society will encourage me to compromise with them. Western officials describe Bakhmut, the scene of several months of heavy fighting, as less important militarily. Behind closed doors, they, along with military leadership Zelensky himself, have reportedly urged the president to order a withdrawal so his troops can focus on preparing for a counteroffensive with heavy weapons provided by the US and its allies. Speaking to the AP mostly in English, during what the agency described as a morale-building journey by rail across Ukraine, Zelensky suggested that Russia would be brave if it wanted to seize Bakhmut. Russian President Vladimir Putin will sell this victory to the West, to his people, to China, to Iran, he predicts. If he tasted blood, the smell that we are weak, he would push, push, push. We must not lose ground because war is a winning streak. Small wins, small steps, added Zelensky. The battle for the city, a key logistics hub in eastern Ukraine, has been one of the fiercest and bloodiest in the Ukrainian conflict so far. According to media reports, Kiev had lost some of its most experienced troops while holding the city. It was also alleged to have flowed in newly conscripted and untrained soldiers to shore up the defensive lines, causing significant casualties. In the interview, Zelensky also complained about the lack of contact with Chinese President Xi Jinping, who visited Moscow last week. Zelensky said as president he chose to unify the country rather than divide it. Lack of ammo. While at this time Ukraine also has not gathered enough resources to launch an attack. In an interview released on Saturday by the Japanese newspaper Yomiuri, Zelensky said the situation on the fronts was not good, explaining that Kiev's troops lacked enough ammunition to launch the operation. On the subject of the offensive, Zelensky stated that, "We can't start yet. Without tanks, artillery, and US-supplied rocket launchers, HIMARS, we cannot send our brave soldiers to the front lines. We are waiting for the ammunition to come from our partners," he added, claiming that the Russian troops had fired 3 times as many shells as the Ukrainian side. In this regard, he repeated his call to Kiev's Western backers to send more weapons and urged them to sign off on the delivery of the fighter jets. Commenting on the potential for dialogue with Russia, Zelensky insisted that absolutely no conditions have been made for this, pointing out that Russian troops must leave territory Ukraine claims as its own first. Moscow has repeatedly said it is open to talks with Kiev on condition it recognizes the realities on the ground, referring to the new status of 4 former Ukrainian territories as part of Russia. Speculation about an imminent Ukrainian spring counterattack has been swirling in the Western media for several weeks now. Last week, Politico reported that the US expected Kiev to begin the offensive in May, with Ukrainian forces seeking entry into Crimea either by crossing the Dnieper River, deemed an unlikely option, or moving out of their positions in the north. Around the same time, the New York Times reported that Western officials were concerned that Ukraine's costly efforts to defend the strategic Donbas city of Artyomsk, known as Bakhmut in Ukrainian, could jeopardize an impending attack, given that Kiev's Western backers would be unable to replenish its ammunition stocks soon. With this in mind, a Pentagon official quoted by the outlet described the anticipated push as a last resort. On Friday, former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev, who served as deputy chairman of the Security Council, said that Moscow was well aware of Ukraine's plans to carry out an attack, noting that the Russian General Staff made its own judgment on the matter and planned a response. Russia accuses the US of being hypocritical about nuclear protests in Belarus. Uncle Sam's country has been doing this for a long time. The United States has criticized Russia's move to place its nuclear warheads in the Belarusian ring pit. Even though Uncle Sam's country has been doing the same thing in NATO member countries for a long time. Moscow ambassador to Washington Anatoly Antonov called the U.S. action irresponsible hypocrisy. The U.S. response to Russia's plans to place nukes in Belarus is a clear example of American political hypocrisy, Antonov said, according to Russia Today. Antonov commented on remarks by U.S. State Department Representative Vedant Patel, who denounced what he called Russia's irresponsible nuclear rhetoric, pointing out that no other nation has inflicted such damage on arms control or sought to undermine strategic stability in the European country. In a statement on Telegram, Antonov said, U.S. officials have very short memories. It is Washington that has been systematically destroying the legal foundations of bilateral relations in strategic areas for a long time. Trying to find a speck in someone else's eye, they stopped seeing a speck in their own eye a long time ago, he added. The ambassador cited the U.S. decision to withdraw from the Anti-Ballistic Missile (ABM) treaty in 2002, and more recently, from the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces (INF) and the Open Sky Treaty. Washington also failed to comply with certain limitations of the New START Treaty, which limits Russia's and America's nuclear arsenals, leading Moscow to suspend its participation, Antonov said. Over the past 60 years, Washington has stationed its tactical nuclear weapons in 5 non-nuclear weapons countries: Belgium, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands and Turkey, the ambassador said. We have repeatedly shown the world double standards in U.S. foreign policy. The administration is sending one message to everyone. The United States is allowed to do anything, whereas the rest of the world, especially Russia, is not allowed anything. Last week, President Vladimir Putin announced that Russian tactical nuclear weapons would arrive in Belarus as early as this summer, explaining that the move was prompted by Britain's recent decision to provide Ukraine with depleted uranium shells. Commenting on the decision, U.S. National Security Council spokeswoman Adrienne Watson said Washington had seen no sign that Russia was planning to use nuclear weapons, while the EU's top diplomat, Josep Borrell, threatened sanctions on Belarus, calling Moscow's plans an escalation. Irresponsible. It says Russian tactical nuclear weapons are likely to arrive in Belarus as early as this summer, Russian President Vladimir Putin said on Saturday. Moscow is completing construction of a special storage facility for such weapons, amid repeated calls by Minsk to deploy them on its territory, he added. The site in Belarus will be ready by July 1st, Putin told Russia 24 TV. The president also said that Moscow had no plans to hand over control of any tactical nuclear weapons to Minsk and would only deploy its own weapons to Belarus. He did not specify when exactly the weapons would be transported to the new location. The move was prompted by Britain's decision to provide Kiev with depleted uranium ammunition, Putin explained. Britain announced earlier in March that it plans to send the shells to Ukraine for use with the Challenger 2 battle tank. Moscow denounced the move as a sign of absolute recklessness, irresponsibility and impunity on the part of London and Washington. The U.S. dismissed Russia's concerns by calling the depleted uranium shells a regular type of munition that has been in use for decades. The Russian Ministry of Defense later warned that its use could trigger a radioactive disaster in Ukraine, given NATO's use of such munitions in Iraq. Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko has repeatedly raised the issue of the threat posed to his nation by the nuclear weapons deployed by the U.S. to EU countries. In October 2022, he pointed to nuclear sharing talks between Washington and Warsaw, warning that nuclear weapons could be stationed in Poland, which borders Belarus. Minsk needed to take appropriate steps to tackle this threat, Lukashenko said at the time, adding that he would discuss the issue with Moscow. Currently, U.S. nuclear weapons are deployed in Belgium, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands and Turkey. In 2021, Russia asked for weapons to be returned as part of its security proposal, but the U.S. and NATO refused. European Union Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell has threatened to impose new sanctions on Belarus if it goes ahead with its nuclear deal with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Belarus hosts Russian nuclear weapons, but that option can still be abandoned, it's their choice. The EU is ready to respond with further sanctions through sanctions in the economic sector, Borrell said via a tweet on his Twitter account. The warning was issued after Russia held a closed meeting with Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko to realize plans for the delivery of tactical nuclear weapons to the Belarusian border region by the coming weekend. Launching from Euronews, the nuclear weapons package was sent as part of the construction of a special storage facility to accommodate Russian tactical nuclear weapons along with 10 nuclear-armed aircraft, so that Russia can more easily attack key Ukrainian points on the battlefield. Although Belarus has yet to decide whether to agree to the deal, Putin claims it will continue to send Belarus nuclear supplies the same as what the United States, US, has done. The United States has been doing this for decades. They have long ago placed their tactical nuclear weapons on the territory of their allies, Putin said. Meanwhile, Borrell assessed that Belarus' openness towards Russia could become a dangerous threat to European security. It may even exacerbate the European region's security conflict over the past year. Especially if these weapons are used, it is likely to produce a far more devastating impact than the tragedies in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Russia's nuclear rhetoric is dangerous and irresponsible. NATO is alert and we are closely monitoring the situation, said NATO spokeswoman Ona Lungescu. Putin did not reveal how much of his country's nuclear stockpile, but the US government believes Russia currently has about 2,000 tactical nuclear weapons, including tactical aircraft carrying bombs, short-range missile warheads and artillery shells.